All right, good morning, everyone. To all of you here and to all of you streaming online, welcome to the All Souls Community Forum coming to you from All Souls Unitarian Universalist Church in Kansas City, Missouri. I'm Joe Robertson, a member of this church and a member of the Forum Committee, supporting this forum that for 80 years has been providing our community a platform to explore and discuss the most compelling issues of the day. Today, continuing an annual tradition that has been going on much of these 80 years, we welcome our Kansas City Mayor to speak on the state of our city. Quinton Lucas, a proud Kansas City native, lawyer, and former city council member, was elected as the city's 55th mayor in 2019. He is a friend of this community, a friend of this forum. Mr. Mayor, welcome to our podium.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Well, it is such a thrill to be back. I will take only a few brief walks down memory lane with you all, but I remember I decided to run for mayor roughly almost really 5 years ago. And one of the more interesting forums was here at this church. And as you may recall, it felt like there were about 200 people running. In reality, there were 12 of us. And I remember the 12 of us sitting on this stage, and we had quite the diverse group in policy and background. And that was in the primary season, where it appeared that there was a different forum every hour. And I turned to then City Councilwoman Jolie Justice, and I said to her, I don't know who gets through this or anything of the sort, but if we both break through, let's make sure we organize where these will be, have one once a week, all of that. And you all, and to her credit, she said absolutely. You all helped create this great compromise where we had a robust schedule of, I think, good and informed conversations. And I still get to see Councilwoman Justice occasionally, who is now the General Counsel at University Health at the Truman Medical Center. And so every now and then in politics, although I certainly feel blessed for my position, I'll bump into her and I say, how are you liking life? And she says, well, I make about 4 times more, I have vacations, and nobody's telling me what to do. I'm like, well, all right, how's mayor? Well, you know, it's okay. But I want to say thank you to all of you. In some ways, although this is a speech that is an annual one, I really see it as an opportunity to look over where we have been the last 4 years, where perhaps we will go the next 4 years and in the generation ahead. I became mayor in the August of 2019. And as you might recall, things were, for the most part, good in Kansas City. There were issues we needed to address. But I remember being at Chiefs training camp that year. And I spoke to our players, including our quarterback, Patrick Mahomes, and others, and said it would be really helpful if you won the Super Bowl this year. And lo and behold, they did. And I still recall in February of 2020, I was on stage, and an interesting thing, and you all are used to having wonderful speakers and orators before you, and I don't pretend to be one of the better ones, but I still remember I went to the Chiefs celebration. It was a cold day in February of 2020, and I thought about these great speakers of the past, you know, William Jennings Bryan and Bobby Kennedy and others, and I thought this is my chance to speak in front of a crowd of roughly 700,000 people. But absolutely no one cares what I have to say. And so in that great moment, that opportunity for my day in American rhetoric, I said, hey, Chiefs fans, show me your red. Woo. Got a good ovation without boos, but nonetheless, I thought, all right, I guess I'll have to tell my son. This was my big shot. But after that, I remember, I think I'd either gone home that day or I was elsewhere. And I spoke to my mother, and this was February of 2020, and I said, this mayor job, it's like the easiest thing ever, not so bad. And then, of course, the world changes a bit for all of us thereafter. We dealt with pandemic, and we dealt with the political disputes and battles that existed through that time. I thought frequently about a group like this one, as we were going through different orders, emergency orders, closure of a number of public activities, and then the political blowback that's come back since. I saw that it was important for us, no matter what the pressure was each day, to make sure that we, and I say we, our public health director, Dr. Rex Archer, my staff at the city, so many others that we worked with. It was important that we always look out for the health of our community, particularly those who are most vulnerable. Were there long days and tough days? Absolutely. There were many days whenever we would issue a new order, I would hear really from a number of different sides. First, of course, from those who, for whatever reason, were anti-science, in my opinion, anti-health, and in many ways anti-humanity, who would write me from far, far away and just say, oh, you're all looking to take over everything. We were really trying to help. And the people that I thought about frequently, even as we dealt with some of those more challenging days, were some of the folks that I met along the way. Many of our immigrant populations who lived in Kansas City, many in the historic Northeast, who were going off to meat packing plants each day in rural Missouri or Kansas, where we saw the virus spreading, where we saw people dying, and where we knew we needed to help and intervene. People like our school teachers and daycare providers, who themselves had families to be concerned with each and every day. And so many people who found themselves on ventilators and families that were impacted. That's why we took those important steps, and that's something that I will forever be proud of. As we compared our numbers to cities around the country, particularly here in the Midwest, we saw that we kept people safe, and it's something I'll be proud of for some time. But one of the things that kept me going throughout the time sometimes were the lighter comments that came from folks. Now, of course, occasionally I would get very, very nasty messages, and I won't go into those today. It's a bright Sunday morning. But other times I would get much, much more joyous ones. There was a school teacher in Maryville, Missouri, who noted, "Thank you, Mayor Lucas. None of our leaders in this part of the state actually say or do anything about this. We, the school teachers here, follow the rules and the orders that you lay out, and thank you for working to keep people safe in our region." Somewhat lighter was an email I got from a woman in Leavenworth, Kansas. And she said, "I appreciate your orders and thank you for all that you do. But I have one special request. Every day that you do press conferences, you do them at 12 noon, and that is the exact same time as Days of Our Lives." And she said, "While I love what you have to say, it's such a tense time in the world. Could you please have your press conferences start an hour later so I can watch my stories?" And proving the effectiveness of writing to public officials, I immediately went to my chief of staff and I said, "Why don't we move it to 1 o'clock? Now, fortunately, to her credit, my chief of staff said, "No, we won't push that." But as we went through that crisis, it gave me an opportunity to see the importance of leadership and the opportunities that leaders can have, both when they take those opportunities and at times when they do not. How many of us remember early in the crisis when we saw an opportunity for the then President of the United States to actually step up and to give good guidance and clear guidance in a way? And unfortunately, I think that moment was missed by the President in leadership. During that crisis, after he was frustrated with his health and medical team, he dispatched people like Dr. Anthony Fauci and Dr. Deborah Birx to other parts of the country or to television interviews when he, it appeared, was done speaking with them. And I had an interesting interaction with Deborah Birx, who was part of the team overseeing the response. She was giving recommendations in these conference calls with mayors around the country. And I said to Dr. Birx, "Well, this is all very interesting, and I appreciate you telling me about things like wearing masks and perhaps not having bars open late where we're seeing this community spread. But could you get the president to share it?" And she said, no, I cannot. And unfortunately, I think the inability of people to find that moral center led to more deaths and led to more tragedy in our country. And what I took from that, and I hope what many others did, was to always work hard to speak the truth. There is no shame in being attacked if your attacks are leading to you helping save lives. And I'm proud that we were able to take those steps here in Kansas City, even when our leaders in Washington, and certainly our leaders in Jefferson City, were not doing the same. Thank you so much. So as we progressed through 2020, one of the more painful times thereafter was as we saw the murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis. I recall I was actually visiting my sister in Arkansas at the time, and I had the first moment in a while to be somewhere else, and people were starting to ask, what will Kansas City's response be? And at first, I actually shied away from a response. Not because I didn't see the importance, I didn't see the gravity of the issue, but for me it was painful to see another man, another black man, losing his life on television, watching the video again and again and the ongoing trauma that so many of us were facing. So I was there in Arkansas, and I received a call from our police chief at the time. And he said things were getting rough here on the plaza. And I remember coming back home and seeing how the pattern would work most days. Seeing that during the daytime you would have protests, perhaps more peaceful. In the evening, things would get more tense, and seeing this ongoing conflict. But one of the conversations that the then police chief and I had was, what about if we let the people walk? This idea of just saying people wish to be heard, and if we remove the conflict, if we remove so much of the tension, what if we have the chance to just let people express themselves, express their energy, and know that someone's listening? On roughly the fourth night of protests, that's exactly what happened. Our police officers fell back, the people walked, the people were heard, and for the most part, from then on, Kansas City had peace. Indeed, I think the subject of what my last 4 years have been and what I hope my next 4 years are is how do we remove the tensions in America? And don't mishear me. That doesn't mean that we actually avoid important debates and discussions. But how do we always center moments of tension to finding our shared humanity and continuing to push for ongoing progress? A number of those things that we've been able to do in recent years, I'm exceedingly proud of, because I think in Kansas City we've been able to do that. People ask me sometimes, what is your proudest accomplishment over the last 4 years? And there are many on the professional side. But the one that I remember talking at this church about 4 years ago when on a panel with 12 other people was affordable and attainable housing. While we have had difficulties along the way, I'm proud that in the last year, Kansas City has stood up a housing trust fund. We've been able to put $75 million into the creation and preservation of affordable and attainable housing for our friends and neighbors. What we have done is moved beyond the simple rhetoric, and what we've done is created opportunities for people. As somebody who knew homelessness when I was growing up, who knew substandard housing, this is the sort of change that we need in a community. Projects all the time, although I am certain that will happen as time goes on. We need to make sure that we're creating, and importantly, creating in every neighborhood, in every community in Kansas City. Affordable housing can't just be something that we build in East Kansas City. It can't just be something that we build in the downtown core. We need it in South Kansas City, we need it in the Northland, and we need it so that every child and every family has a shared opportunity to succeed in this city. The other thing that I said 4 years ago was that we are a city that could walk and chew gum. I said it so much that my now wife was like, can't you come up with something else to say? Just some cliche. But I said it delivers a very simple point. That Kansas City can be a place that's on a roll. And indeed, I share the excitement of many. World Cup Soccer 2026 coming to Kansas City. How amazing. We are the smallest market in North America to have World Cup Soccer by a lot, and they're recognizing us. The NFL draft coming in the next several weeks. But as we have NFL drafts and World Cup soccer and nonstop Super Bowl victories, which is really something, we can also be a place that's working on accessible transit for all, affordable housing opportunities for all, and in something that I take great pride in, increasing the salary of every city worker. We had folks when I became mayor that were still making minimum wage of $7.75 an hour. The new lowest wage at City Hall is $17.34 an hour, and we will keep increasing. But we're not stopping there. Again, removing the conflict and removing the tension. We all recognize the future of our world depends on us actually being realistic about climate sustainability. And something very simple that I stumbled upon led me to this wonderful discovery and I think a policy success. And it's looking at trees. You see, when I was in front of you 4 years ago, I lived on the corner of 19th and Paseo. Lovely place, 18th and Vine District. For the most part, not that many trees, at least on my corner, and a lot of other East Side neighborhoods. where they've been cut down over the years, some of which from poor maintenance, others of which from developers, us largely not having any rules in Kansas City to preserve the tree canopy. And then after getting married and having a child, I moved to the neighborhood of Coleman Highlands. It's lovely and incredibly tree-lined. And as I looked out over the mornings and I would see children, often of a different demographic than what I grew up around and certainly that I lived around on Paseo, enjoying this great opportunity to have a good tree canopy, having great investments from our city, I thought, why don't we do this one little step to have the most efficient smog reducer created by God, trees, planted in more neighborhoods in Kansas City. And the most astonishing thing was I introduced an ordinance and I thought it would be very simple. Naivete once again. And then I ran into this kind of anti-tree lobby. Who knew? If you plant too many trees, right, we won't have economic development anymore. If you plant trees, you'll destroy our neighborhoods, huh? Right? I said, as far as I know, and I've never necessarily, although I love my neighborhood now, I haven't lived in the wealthiest neighborhoods of Kansas City, but if I'm ever in some of the fancier ones here in northeast Johnson County, I see that people love mature trees. So once again, we had meeting after meeting after meeting. And at its core, as we were working with developers and some other community interests who didn't even know we could have progress, I said, do you like sitting under a tree? And they said, yeah, for the most part. Do you have any stories with trees from your upbringing at any point? Yeah, we used to climb them, or we had a tree house. And I said, don't you think that the children of Kansas City deserve that in the future? And it was very simple, making that clear and humane point. And we did it, and we were able to pass the first tree preservation ordinance in the history of Kansas City. So as we push sometimes what seem like those lighter accomplishments, occasionally I do run into something that feels like more of a buzzsaw. And that's whenever I have the fortune of going to Jefferson City. You may all remember at the beginning of the play Fiddler on the Roof, there is a question to the rabbi in the neighborhood of, what is a prayer for the czar? What is a good prayer for the czar? May the czar stay healthy and far, far away from us. And often that is what I feel about the Missouri legislature. Unfortunately for us, the Missouri legislature likes to intrude more often. Some weeks ago, and each year I try, because I see it as part of my position, I go to Jefferson City, and the most interesting thing is when I'm in one of the hearing rooms in Jefferson City, I'll look on the walls, and they're all pictures of Kansas City or St. Louis, while everyone in the majority of the legislature is saying we detest those cities. I say, wow, that's Liberty Memorial and the Nelson Atkins and all these things. Art and parks and investment in all of the great public spheres that we have in this community. And so I was there in the morning to testify on a bill relating to policing, and it was fairly non-controversial, so isn't even really the subject of debate. But after I finished testifying at roughly 9:30 in the morning, I heard about a number of things that were happening that day. And as you have likely heard, our state legislature has a particular interest in marginalizing, criminalizing, and harming our LGBTQ friends and neighbors. And so I was there just to be the mayor of Kansas City. I was talking about the chief, so many other things. And people said, Mayor, can you stay? Can you stay? Because we've had all these kind of zany things happen. You see, the day before, the Speaker of the House and a committee chair in our Missouri House, without any notice, had scheduled a number of bills that were going to harm our transgender population. And they thought if they did it in the middle of the week, no one would show up. And so advocates from our cities came out, and more people were joining. And so I said, you know what? I need to be a part of this. And I still remember, I stayed through the day. Of course, every now and then you have to ask for forgiveness from your spouses. Because famous last words, when I left from my home that morning at 6 a.m., I told my wife, oh, this is great. I'll be back by 4 p.m. We'll have a great dinner. We'll do what have you. But I stayed a good deal longer. I finally was able to testify about 5:30 p.m. And in the room behind me were a number of families, children, and others, who said, please, just don't hate us. Don't attack us. each day we deal with enough. We deal with bullying. We deal with so many other issues. Does our state have to be a bully against us? And so as I sat down to testify, and I only had a few minutes, I looked at the legislature and I asked, why? Why are you doing this? I remember my youth. I remember sometimes being in environments where I was different. Perhaps some of you have those experiences in your own lives. And knowing that when I was a kid, I guess it was the 20th century, but nonetheless, when I was one, people actually found ways to bring us together. I remember when I was a kid, my mother thought it was vital for us to go to church each and every Sunday, but we didn't have money for offering, so she would make sure that we always had at least a quarter. It wasn't that much, but I got to go to a community where people accepted me and didn't judge me because of our different income. I remember as I went through life, there were people that created opportunities for me and didn't say because you're black or you're young or you live in a different neighborhood that you're not deserving of every opportunity of this community. Why are we creating that now for young people in this state? And so we had that conversation and we had that discussion. And one of my favorite questions, somebody said, well, Mayor, you're saying that this would only do whatever to so many kids. Aren't there more important things you could come down here to talk about? And I said, actually, I came down here to back the blue today, like you guys. But I'm also here because you can back the blue, or you can support development, or you can grow, but you can also be a human who is looking out for the health and the survival of young people in this state. You can indeed walk and chew gum. And so they sat back and really didn't listen, but kept going on their very way. And it takes me back to a story I think I perhaps shared with you all in the past. Because at the end of that debate, we were unsuccessful. The Missouri House of Representatives has passed a number of bills that I find to be harmful to people, that will lead to more suicides, will lead to more harm to children in our state. But I thought, even though we didn't win, we showed people that we cared. We let people know that they have a place here where someone cares about them. I recall sometimes when I worked on a death penalty case years ago, and won't go into the full facts, the condemned man was executed. We lost, and I was in despair. But I received a note from his daughter, and she said, "Thank you for teaching me that somebody in the world cares about me and my family." I thought I was just a poor black girl in Georgia who nobody cared about or thought about, but you showed that you care. That's what we're doing for our trans brothers and sisters in this state. That's what we're doing for our LGBTQ neighbors broadly. In many ways, that's what we're doing for everyone. Showing them that no matter how much hate comes from Jefferson City or Topeka, they will always have support, they will always have a home, and they will always have a place to be here in Kansas City. So for the next 4 years, what do we expect to do? I expect us to continue to have more great announcements, more great progress, more great development. And certainly I also recognize that some of the development challenge includes the Country Club Plaza, which I will save for that discussion another day. But that also involves us making sure that we stand up for everyone, that we stand up for opportunity for all in Kansas City, that we stand up for fair pay for all, and that 10 years from now that we are actually a model city. I said this the other day, but we often talk about blue dots and red seas, and Lord knows we are one, right? But I think that we can be that blue dot example. Occasionally I'll go to forums and conferences where I'm with other mayors, the mayors of Charlotte or Pittsburgh, Denver, Detroit. And they'll say, yeah, we're all stuck in this tough position. Legislatures have decided to do things that are entirely different. They've decided to have a guns everywhere approach to policy, any number of other things. But I've said, you know what? It is imperative that we keep pushing back. It is imperative that by removing conflict, but still sharing why these simple things matter, we can actually make a difference and win the policy debates long term. Briefly on safety. When I've been before the legislature, I've said this very simple thing about gun policy. And I don't agree with them in the slightest about much in relation to gun policy. But I said, I have a child, and I don't think you have to have a child to care, but I do. And I said, the one thing that I'm trying to work on for all of us is to make sure that my child, and hopefully yours, is never gunned down in a classroom or a schoolroom. And so can't we just try to do all we can? Can't we very simply agree that we need to have solutions for that? Can't we very simply agree that we have a better state when there actually are well-funded public libraries, well-funded public schools, and well-funded and well-supported solutions to safety that help us prevent crime, that help us avoid assault weapons flooding the streets of Kansas City, and that fundamentally look out to protect the humanity of all? So for us, I think Kansas City can continue to be that model. We are good people who care about our friends and neighbors. Sometimes perhaps we're a little too nice, but you know what? I think all of us know that there but for the grace of God goes I, and there but for the grace of God go we. We are proud to look out for all of our neighbors, no matter their circumstances, no matter their background. We are proud to invest in things like zero-fare transit, which give on average $1,500 back each year for that working mother or that working father to get around. And we are proud to say that as we are getting national or global attention for great events, we can tell people, stick around. Stick around, not just here for a football game or any great other spectacle, but also stick around to see that this little dot in a sea sometimes of hatred, in a sea sometimes of folks that aren't trying to build up and support others, is growing, is thriving by being decent, by caring about people, by being humane, and maybe knowing how to walk and chew gum at the same time. Thank you all so much, and God bless you all.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and that's Quinton Lucas, Kansas City Mayor. And now as we're going to move on to our questions from the audience, first we're going to take a brief pause to take up a collection so that you can support the work of this forum and its staff and the associated costs. And I also want to alert everyone to a lot of upcoming events here at the forum. Next Sunday morning, April 9th, Eva K. Lee, professor at Georgia Tech and Emory University, and Doug Samuelson of the Health Systems Agency of Northern Virginia, they will talk on the growing consequences of misinformation on our public health. And the following week, on the 16th, we begin a series of forum events spotlighting cyberbullying and youth suicide prevention, and of course, including love for the LGBTQ members of our community that the mayor just spoke about. And this will culminate in the first weekend of May with a visit from Jane Clementi of the Tyler Clementi Foundation in collaboration with performances May 7th and 8th of the powerful Tyler Suite with director Anthony Edwards, our fantastic soloists and musicians in the All Souls Choir. So it's a big month here, and so you can check out for more information on that on our website at allsoulskc.org. So now we're going to get to your questions. Please come to the microphone and to ask your question, and one question per person until everyone's had a chance, and of course, avoid statements. Just get the question so Mr. Mayor here can get to your answers. And now those of you streaming on YouTube, you can write questions in the chat as we can. If we're able, with time, we will try to get those asked for you also. So we'll get to our first question, and Quinton, back to you.
Thank you so much. Yes, sir.
Hi. Thank you for coming. My question is there anything that you and the city council can do to combat or prevent the Missouri State Legislature from banning drag shows, which they apparently think appear like flash mobs?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and things that I'll start with this. We always think in life that we're on a trajectory towards progress, and I do believe we are, right? but my goodness, do we see some bumps along the way. And the fact that it seems like we have gone backwards over the past 20 to 30 years, particularly on LGBTQ relations in this state, is troubling to me. In terms of Kansas City, a few things that we would do, and I think that you're seeing them. One, I've already talked to the mayor of St. Louis about any necessary litigation. I do think that a broad-based ban on drag performance, it violates the First Amendment. Actually, you do have a right to expression, and so that would be the first step that we would look to. The other thing, though, that you can see is actually just more situations of non-enforcement. And so making sure that through our own local, either law enforcement agencies or others, that you actually aren't enforcing that as some sort of priority. We've had elements of that in the past with marijuana laws in Kansas City, for example, and we would look to do the same to make sure that, you know, we aren't seeing the raids that you hear about, Stonewall, we've had our own, how we can go back 50 years, 60 years in policy to suggest that we're criminalizing performance is something that's beyond me. So we would look to take those initial steps. And I also do, often we are negative about Jefferson City, and rightfully so. I do want to take a moment to thank people like State Senator Greg Razor in this area, State Senator Lauren Arthur, Barbara Washington, and others from the Kansas City Metro who are fighting the good fight, while at the same time it seems it's an uphill battle currently. Yes, sir.
Could you tell me what are reparations, and are we in the process of studying reparations in Kansas City?
We will soon be studying reparations in Kansas City. So reparations for slavery has been a conversation since emancipation, frankly. And in recent years, you have seen more discussion about whether there is a way that we can, I think, first of all, recognize the sins of our past, including the city. We were founded in 1850 formally, however, it had been a settlement well before that. We know the Kansas-Missouri battles. Missouri is a slave state. This area is one, particularly the Westport area. And so it's, first of all, I think, us trying to make sure we're studying what we have done and how policies that led to discrimination in this community have perpetuated a number of divides, the truce divide being the most glaring of them. In terms of what comes next, I am tasked with appointing a board of persons to study that issue. I need to do that by May 1st, which is increasingly much closer than it seemed a while ago. And then following that, I think my interest is seeing what can we, from a policy and an investment perspective in communities, do to atone for our past. If you read the Fox News website, which I don't recommend, but if you do, then typically, right, they'll run these headlines that say, oh, San Francisco is promising to give each African American $40 million. I talked to the mayor of San Francisco, that's not true. And B, right, I think actually what we are seeing in this conversation is saying, how can our investment actually address what we have done wrong in the past? I'll give one brief example. Actually two, because it pains me to no end. Whenever we actually invest in the inner city or predominantly Black or Latino areas, right, people tend to say, oh my gosh, they're wasting money again and all of that. What do we never ask real questions about when we're investing in suburban or ex-urban development? Have you all ever thought about the fact that our zero-fare transit program in Kansas City, free buses, costs us about $8 million a year? Compare that to how much we spend to add another lane on 435 or on Interstate 70. It is an astonishing and stark difference. We spend billions of dollars every year on highways to get people out of this community, frankly, all the time. Right now, the Missouri Department of Transportation is studying another lane on Interstate 70 to take out more inner-city homes, by the way, through Kansas City's 3rd District. When my request would be, if you're going to spend $300 million on transportation in Kansas City, why don't you actually spend it for people in our community, not people just leaving it? To me, having actually a mindset of reparations is how do we actually reinvest in communities that we have in many ways destroyed, as opposed to actually perpetuating the same harms of the past, and frankly seeing that as a core part of our policy rather than something that is just an aside. That is what I'm expecting this Reparations Commission to study, and we'll be sharing more on that as time goes ahead. Yes, ma'am, it's always good to see you.
Hi there. I and my husband in the past have owned 2 different apartment buildings in Midtown, and we sold them a few years ago, and we made sure that we sold to local people and people who were going to keep the rents as we believed for people, affordable for people who work in that area to be able to live in that area. And I think that's good for every neighborhood. So what I want to know is how, mayors can't do everything, of course, but how is it you can help neighborhoods such as 39th Street, which feels like there's predatory development activity going on there? How can you help us keep people who work in that area and that keep and not lose the character of the neighborhood, but also provide some density?
So first things first, your point on mayors not being able to do everything, I learned to never answer that way. When I bumped into a woman, I was walking down 12th Street right before Paseo, and she asked a question about, I think, violence. And I said, well, ma'am, the Missouri legislature has a lot. She said, wait. You the mayor? She's like, if you can't do nothing, then I really can't do nothing. So come up with a much better answer than that. And so ever since then, I've always been like, all right, I'm going to figure out something. But in connection with this, a few different things. First, I think the biggest part of our Housing Trust Fund has been making sure it isn't just, and this was some sort of tension with some of our tenants groups and others, was making sure that it wasn't just a developer's slush fund, that it didn't just become funding to help a developer who already has the money build an even larger high-rise on Main Street along the streetcar line, which is another area of discussion as time comes up. And making sure that we actually make grants that are accessible for those building owners that have 8 units, 10 units, 20 units, rather than the ones that are building 300 units downtown. That's a step one. A step two is actually making sure through our own zoning policy that we are adhering to what the rules are. Very often, and I served on the Board of Zoning Adjustment before I was on City Council, we will waive just about every rule possible if somebody says, heck, I'm building something. And so we'll allow them to go far above the density thresholds that are allowed in an area like the 39th Street corridor or Midtown. We will let them not do any of the setback rules with other properties. And fundamentally, we're letting them just build these gargantuan structures with us nearby. And so what we have tried to do through the City Planning and Development Department is make sure that we're limiting that, make sure that we're limiting the ability of Airbnbs and short-term rentals to predominate our community as well, which is what you're seeing not just in single-family housing, but more of our smaller apartment buildings, and to actually make sure that the market is the people who are here, those who are working in our community, those who are living in our community, and not just those who are either looking to come through fairly quickly, short-term rentals, and certainly residential speculators. It's an ongoing battle, but it's something that I think we're making progress on. Thank you so much.
Good morning. As an openly gay man and a pediatric nurse, I'm incredibly concerned about the issues that the legislature is pushing. As you mentioned, our version of Don't Say Gay bill, which goes even further than Florida, the possibility of rolling back recognition or even performing gay marriages in the state. Are there any specific actions that Kansas City can take to help protect the LGBTQI community should those issues actually be passed and become law?
So I learned about one just the other day, and my background on Friday, we had the Assistant Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services, Admiral Rachel Levine, who is transgender. And we did something different than usual. We had a panel, and you all have been meeting mayors for a long time. Sometimes we'll just show up and talk at you and be like, Happy Black History Month, here's my speech, we keep it moving. This time, the community said, we want to have a true community town hall, which is led by members of the community rather than led by you. And we listened. One of the requests was, can Kansas City become a sanctuary city for transgender persons and issues? And my first question, and I said, tell me what that means. and what that is. And there are a few different things that I think we absolutely can do. One, making sure that you have access to gender-affirming health care in your city, and that you prohibit any criminalization or enforcement of that care within the city of Kansas City. And that is a step one and an important thing for us to do. Second, making sure that you, the city itself, make sure that you extend all protections, all rights, not just to your employees, but persons in Kansas City. So to the extent the Missouri legislature tries to, for example, prohibit the provision of either gender-affirming care or, frankly, any type of health care, and I include in that abortion, different issue, but I include all of those in the same, making sure that through our health plans, we continue to fund them. Through our health plans, we continue to make them accessible for folks and to travel for that as well. Those are important steps for us. Right now in Kansas City, we have it a little easier than some, since the state of Kansas, at least, on abortion and reproductive health care continues to provide them. So it's an easier thing to fund. That's respecting our humanity. And so we will continue to push back on that, both from the sanctuary city angle, from our own pronouncements, making sure that we continue to have a robust and strong LGBTQIA commission, and I think giving voice to things. Every now and then I forget about the importance of the job because I'm in it, right? And I see myself as some guy because I really am. But as I was talking to members of our transgender community who have dealt with oppression, who have dealt with hate, who have dealt with any number of issues, they said having the mayor in the room, having the police chief in the room, which is something that would not have always happened, was something that shows our commitment. We will not stop on that. And importantly, it is not lip service. We will put time, we will put money, we will put investment in making sure that we are a place where everyone can go. I will leave with this story on this question. I was a law professor at the University of Kansas before I was in this job, and I still teach from time to time. And a gentleman came to my office, and this was while Sam Brownback was governor, during his 8 years of trying to drive that state completely into the ground. And the governor had I think, repealed the benefits to same-sex employees. At the end of her tenure as governor of Kansas, Kathleen Sebelius had extended them. Governor Brownback, as soon as he got in, said, we're repealing this. We don't want gay and lesbian employees in the state of Kansas. And it led to lots of people leaving places like the University of Kansas and state of Kansas employment. But there was a student from Wichita, the gay gentleman from Wichita, who came to my office. And he said, well, as I think about jobs, I think I need to leave, but I really actually do like my family in Wichita. And what I thought at the time, and what I continue to believe, is I said, Sam Brownback is not more Kansas than you. Don't let them drive you out. This is your state in the same way that this is our state. And this is our Missouri. For better or worse, I was born in Missouri. I was raised here, and I continue to live here. And what I believe is that what we will not do is simply just say, the legislature's crazy, they'll do their thing, we'll ignore them. Instead, what we will do is fight through everything that we can do to make sure that people know that they are welcome, make sure that we are allies and supporters, make sure that we are loud and that we are proud and that we are saying that Kansas City, Missouri, is actually Missouri. It is the place that's growing. It is this place that will make sure these folks have an opportunity to perform drag, to have their marriage, to do whatever it is that they want to do. And so I think we'll continue to be part of that, and I think we'll continue to grow. Because as I've seen, certainly on LGBTQ issues, and you all know better than me, there is progress long term. If I think back to 2004 when this state voted to ban same-sex marriage, and it seemed hopeless, we are getting somewhere. It just seems like right now there's a lot more somewhere we have to fight each and every day. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Listen, it just killed us. Listening to our concerns. I come from the Waldo area. Dang, what did I do? And we just had a meeting, and it was about something simple, our sidewalks. we're not getting our sidewalks worked on. We voted for the $800 million project, and we've called in every year, and we just seem like we're getting the runaround. What bothers me about our neighborhood is that we're getting a petition together to send to the Attorney General to investigate I said, no, 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 you do not want to get Jefferson City anything about this. So I said, I'm going to see the mayor today, and if I have to tackle him, I will talk to them. Because I said, something's wrong someplace when and coming here, I thought, do I really want to do this? But I had to wait on my car because people have to walk in the street in order to walk with families. And some of it is so bad when your friends come, they get out of the car, but then they have to pull their car up farther because the sidewalk is so humped that they can't get out. And I'm just saying, who do we reach? Who do we talk to? How do we get this done? Because it seems like it's so sporadic, and yet in some of them where it's actually physically dangerous. And me, as a senior citizen, having a hard time walking, I have to be very careful. It's sad when you can't walk in your own neighborhood for something simple as your sidewalk.
You're in Waldo? Yes. So, I'm not supposed to touch the microphone, it says, but nonetheless. A few things on sidewalks. First, we have to admit a flaw that we've made. And y'all remember, we voted in 2017 on an $800 million infrastructure bond that was supposed to fund lots in sidewalks. And one of the things that I was angriest about when I was running for mayor, but somehow it continues to happen at times, is that we will divert that money into things like what I call a road to nowhere. It was in the Northland. It was a 4-lane road that really just connected one development project to the end of a field for development later. Our biggest mistake in Kansas City consistently is not actually taking care of our neighborhoods, particularly our oldest neighborhoods in Kansas City, and that includes yours. What we are doing and just passed was a new sidewalk prioritization plan, which looks to the age of the sidewalks in an area, looks to, and we have people going around the city now that are actually inspecting the nature of the sidewalks in each area and doing something that's different than just spending infrastructure dollars on development or something different. However, and this is where it gets challenging, we need you to remain adamant in connection with it because that plan and that project is only so good as us adhering to it. Occasionally, there will be development projects and the developer will say, we want to spend the infrastructure money on some other development deal and therefore, take that money out of the pot for your sidewalks and put it into something else. I've opposed consistently those types of ordinances. Usually I'm successful, but it's making sure that we're doing our prioritization and that we have funding for it. Let me give you one other interesting fact, though. You may all be familiar with the statewide vote about 25% police funding. Included in that is actually, and I only learned it this year, I should have known long before, back in the early 1990s, and you voted for it again most likely, we passed a capital improvement sales tax, the Public Improvement Advisory Committee. 25% of that money, or $23 million a year, is taken out of capital improvements and put into the police department budget as part of that kind of idea, the plan. I think when we talk about having the ability to control our own decisions in Kansas City and to not make this a simple colony of Jefferson City, it's allowing us to do things like that. Because if we were able to retain our $23 million that you voted on to actually go into things like sidewalks and infrastructure, we also have a separate public safety tax, actually, which isn't even in the 25%. I'll explain that someday. But nonetheless, making sure that we are actually, which also present a challenge. Here's the real deal. In the last census, the area that lost the most population in Kansas City was not the east side, certainly wasn't downtown, which is growing, and the Northland is growing. It is South Kansas City, including Southeast and Southwest Kansas City. And I think that is part and parcel. You can have the schools conversation, but a lot of it is our underinvestment in neighborhoods like yours. That needs to change if we want to have a growing city. Who should you call?
Yeah, who should we talk to? Because I'll go back to them and tell them, look, after the election, and we know who to talk to, keep calling in like you have been doing, because the squeaky wheel gets the oil. So, call in.
Particular person, if you can remember the name, although this is on YouTube, so it will live forever. Jason Waldron, Waldron. Jason Waldron. He is the Director of Transportation in Kansas City, but for us, that includes roads, sidewalks, bike lanes. He is the one who has the main responsibility, and fortunately for us, I believe he lives in the Waldo area.
Now.
But yeah, just call him. He should, yes, call him. You don't have to call the Attorney General. We'll make sure that Jason takes.
No matter what, no. Okay, thank you.
During the pandemic, a lot of people bought food from farmers markets. And one of my friends is trying to start up a hobby farm, but she's run into issues where only developers are allowed to buy land in certain areas. Is there anything that we can do to allow people like her to provide food, sustainable for our local economy?
So yes, I'll give just the answer, the legal answer, and then maybe there's more work we can do in collaboration thereafter. But the answer is very simply this. It would be making the zoning. So the way zoning goes, you go from least restrictive to most restrictive. Your least restrictive is usually where there are a bunch of semis parked and everything else in certain industrial areas of the city. Most restrictive are your residential neighborhoods. Very simply, we could, now we'd have to get you all support, but pass some zoning change that allows for urban agricultural farming uses within residential districts, particularly if they don't get too big, right? So maybe no one wants a gigantic, big agricultural operation near them, but if we're talking about actually either one block, multiple blocks, but, or even just several lots, right? That's the sort of thing that allows us to address it. Because you're right now, with the nature of it, you usually have to get a special use permit to be able to do it. Special use permit, as you may know, allows almost anybody to object, and maybe they're saying, we want a new house. Although the real thing about most of our vacant lots in Kansas City, some are ones where we haven't found anything, but often we're running into a situation where neighbors, after a few years, like having a vacant lot next to them because it's a bigger yard, right? It's a bigger yard, you don't deal with anybody and all of that. So really changing that use would be the most important way, kind of as the last gentleman was noting, in terms of action, it would be an ordinance change, but one that I wouldn't think is the most controversial because it is, I think, important for all of us. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I appreciate the plurality of walking and chewing gum and these multiple issues. You briefly touched on the pandemic and the public health folks who were the heroes of the day, if you will. And I'm a retired physician, so I'll give you my viewpoint. Healthcare is a mess. We don't have a system. There are several cities who have recently done ordinances, and basically this is just a statement of support. It doesn't have any law behind it, but supporting universal health care. Our sister city of St. Louis did that in the last year. Would you be in favor and would you support such a statement, ordinance, whatever you want to call it?
Yes, absolutely. I think that the pandemic showed us the concerns with our healthcare system fundamentally that we still haven't addressed. I am exceedingly frustrated with the fact that the state of Missouri broadly went from underinvesting in our public healthcare system, but we are seeing the results. You are seeing it in impacts to our children, to senior citizens, the spread of sexually transmitted diseases. I mean, it is just, our underinvestment has a very clear result in life outcomes for the people of Missouri. And people, not just in Kansas City, right, throughout the state. And so I would absolutely, I'll look up the St. Louis support statement because we are very supportive of that. And it's something that is just going to be so important. Probably the most astonishing thing in politics, and I haven't mastered this yet, is kind of anti-healthcare, anti-education, all these things that to me just don't make sense in the slightest. I mean, I thought that there was just this broad understanding that we wanted for our next generation, and indeed ourselves, to be able to be healthier, to be educated, to be able to find books, and we are seeing something different. So we would be very supportive of that and active in pushing against. Yes, ma'am.
Good morning. I am currently unemployed, and as a result, I'm living in an area of Kansas City that I would never voluntarily choose. To me, I describe it to my friends as looking like Beirut. I did not grow up that way. I grew up very middle class, so it's been excessively difficult on me. In order to get out of that area, I have to find a job, and around that area, there's no job. I'm currently relying on public transportation, which at present is not reliable at all. I have an app on my phone that will tell me when your bus is coming, if your bus is coming, and generally about 4:30, 5 o'clock every morning, the texts begin to arrive. This bus, that bus is delayed due to staffing issues. The translation of that is, your bus isn't coming. And we need to fix that. I can't get a job if I can't get there. You know, most employers will accept the excuse, oh, the bus didn't come today, once, maybe twice. After that, they'll say, listen, you came to us for employment. You said you had reliable transportation, which although, especially since I'm unemployed, I'm very appreciative of the fact that there's no charge for the fare, because sometimes that would knock me out of the ballgame. And isn't that pitiful that $1 would knock me out of the ballgame to catch the bus? But there has to be a bus to catch. And so what can we do to fix that?
Yeah, so I have a few issues with the Kansas City Area Transportation Authority. I think that sometimes folks will conflate the zero fare transit with in some way then taking away their resources and ability to deliver bus service. I don't believe that's the case. They have a $100 million budget. They're sitting on, I think, roughly $100 million in reserves because they got lots of money during the pandemic. There is an administrative and management issue and concern at KCATA. Significant concerns with buses not showing up on time, routes not being filled, them having not done the work to try to keep up an employee base. Part of that was underpayment of bus drivers and operators during the pandemic, even when they had funds. A few things that we're trying to do now to make sure we address that. First, we have a new system. It's IRIS. That's the city flower for what it's worth, but it is a micro transit system that allows folks who find themselves slightly off of routes, because you'll note we've cut some too. My sister lived off of 47th and Blue Ridge, and when they just got rid of the bus, that meant people coming from the furthest east side neighborhoods of our city just couldn't get into the city. So that micro transit approach is one step in terms of what we are planning to do to try to address at least the existence of bus issue. On the operational side, and you all may wonder, let me be clear, I do not particularly like state-controlled institutions, or in some situations, even regionally controlled institutions, because it limits our accountability. KCATA is one of them. Johnson County Transit has voted to pull themselves out of the Metro Bus KCATA system. They still have board seats on that board, however. So what do they end up doing? What our KCATA has done, and maybe some of you have read about it, is they've gotten into the economic development business. Someone asked me about 39th Street. The giant apartment complex just south of 39th and State Line is a KCATA incentivized project. What frustrates me, to your point, is what y'all should be doing is actually making sure the buses work, that the buses run on time, before you're actually waiving taxes that go to the school district, to the city, and others. I see I'm taking a long time. In so many words, then, it's just very much this. One, Ride KC Iris should speak precisely to the issue that you're noting. I think there is an app for it, and so that would be one very simple one. Longer term, and even medium term, it is making sure management is more accountable fundamentally to the people of Kansas City, and that's something that we're working on with them now too. Thank you.
And thank you. And the mayor has agreed to continue this conversation informally, so we will be moving down to Conover here to continue this conversation. So, but again, thank you, Mayor Quinton Lucas, for being here today. So We will be continuing the conversation if you'd like informally down the hall. Now, we also invite you to stay right here if you want to stay for the regular service. That begins at 10:45. And remember, we got a lot of things coming on this month, May 7th and 8th, a lot of events and forum events that you can, allsoulskc.org. So again, thank you very much, and everybody have a good day.